It's October, so if you're a baseball fan, you know what that means. It's time to start your draft prep for next year's fantasy baseball leagues. Okay, postseason baseball too. I mean, we live for the MLB playoffs, right? But that's a given. If you're into fantasy, especially Dynasty, you don't wait to start making preparations. You want to look ahead and figure out who's going to be on the radar before everyone else does. It's a good time to start looking at the young players that will make an impact next year. So I'm going to run down my list of the top 12 pitching prospects that will be major league ready next season. At number 1, let's start with a guy who was the number 1 overall pick by the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's Paul Skenes. After a great career at LSU, this is a pitcher who has an elite fastball, put up some amazing stats, struck out over 200 batters in just 19 starts at LSU. At 6'6", 235 already, it's pretty clear to see this is a power pitcher in the making, and I don't think it'll take long before he is thrown into the mix. You know, teams just aren't waiting anymore for their top pitching prospects. I'm not assuming that he'll be up with the club right out of spring training. We could be looking at a mid-season call-up, but at this point, what do the Pirates have to lose? I don't think it'll be long before we get him in the mix, and obviously the upside is very tangible. At number 2, we'll go with a guy that should be familiar to you. That's Kyle Harrison of the San Francisco Giants. We saw him later in the season after a rough first start, went out and struck out 11 batters against Cincinnati and looked lights out. And then as soon as everybody was all over him, then it was pretty rocky from there on out, but he ended on a good note. He went 5 scoreless against the Dodgers in his last start of the season. You know the deal with young pitchers. Pretty much with any of these guys I'm going to talk about, there will be ups and downs, a lot of bumps in the road, no matter how talented they are. I like the fact that Harrison has probably gotten his out of the way. That experience is invaluable. This guy has, of course, the great pitch mix and that unique slurve pitch. And I think that he's somebody, especially playing in that climate in San Francisco, the great ballpark factor, has everything working in his favor. At number 3 is a guy I've had my eye on for the last couple of years and has progressed pretty nicely. That's Mick Abel, the Philadelphia Phillies organization. This looks like another power pitcher, has a great fastball and also really good curveball to go with it, followed by a changeup as his third pitch. It's hard to resist making these player comps for young players, and a lot of times it just comes off as kind of disingenuous. In this case, I will say that this strikes me as a potential right-handed version of Blake Snell. A guy with a great fastball, like I said, that elite curveball, got the frame that's very similar, just from the right side. Will have some issues with command at times, hopefully not to the extent Snell had over the last couple of seasons, but obviously he comes anywhere close to that kind of upside, you'll be glad you had him. And now we're going to go with the Detroit Tigers, who've had their share of up-and-coming pitching prospects who have been very hit and miss lately. But I want to talk about Jackson Jobe. Like so many Tigers prospects in the rotation, he's had some health issues too, had a back issue, but it seems like he's over that now. This guy has all the arm talent in the world, but what's interesting is that mid-season, it looks like he's tinkering around with his pitch mix. He's supposedly added a cutter, and that could be very interesting. This is a guy who has said he's into analytics. He's going to go through everything and try to figure out what works and what doesn't. Yeah, I like that approach. Again, Detroit, not the best organization so far is really having these guys pan out, but it could be Jobe. That actually turns out to be, if he's healthy, a Tariq Skubal type who can be dominant at times when he's out there. Now at number 5, I'm going to go with Cade Horton, the Chicago Cubs. Horton was the number 7 pick a year ago, moved his way up to Double-A during the 2023 season, where he only gave up 8 runs and 18 hits over 27 innings. Horton uses 4 pitches, got above average fastball and slider, and then also mixes in a curve and a changeup. The Cubs have a sneaky good farm system, and they got some pitching talent that is almost ready to break through. Horton is the guy I think has the best shot to be in that rotation, kind of a mid-rotation option by the time the season comes. And then another Cubs pitcher, although this guy, I'm not sure if he's made for the rotation or might wind up being a late inning reliever, possibly a closer. That's Ben Brown, former Phillies prospect. Now, he's been a slow mover throughout the minors, a guy who is now coming on kind of late at the age of 24. Or at least he'll be 24 when the season gets here. At the AAA level last year, across 72 innings, he struck out 31% of batters faced. The problem is that the ratios weren't too good. He had some bad outings, got hit hard at times. But the real issue is command, 15.8% walk rate. He's definitely going to have to work on that. So Brown is a guy that it's still hard to say what he'll produce once he gets the call. A ton of upside, got 3+ pitches, but he's got to figure out how to reel them in. So he might be better suited for the bullpen, but we'll see what happens. At number 7, a guy who could rise up this list very fast, but can't dispute that there is some risk here with Ricky Tiedemann of the Toronto Blue Jays. The question here is, when will he get called up and how much will he be out there? This guy who had some arm soreness last year when he came back was really handled with kid gloves, only 44 innings pitched, and that was across multiple levels. This is the type of pitcher that in terms of just pure talent should be very near the top of the list, but we're going to have to see exactly how it pans out, whether this guy is going to even get a shot to throw multiple innings at a time, and when they would give him the call. Definitely prefer him as a stash in Dynasty as opposed to a redraft option, but somebody who, whenever it does happen along the line, I think at some point he cracks the major league roster, then you're going to want to take a close look at. Now for St. Louis, let's look at Tink Hence. This is a pitcher I think has a strong chance to earn a roster spot right out the gate. In fact, a little surprised with the Cardinals the way things ended last year that they didn't give him a shot. Hence has elite fastball velocity despite not really being a big guy. Now, he did struggle a bit at the Double-A level, but it wasn't due to command, not walking a ton of batters, just had some issues with home runs. There should definitely be some openings in that Cardinal rotation to begin next year. Hence is a guy I think has a strong shot to log the most innings among all these pitchers I've talked about, up there with possibly Harrison being the only exception. Now, if we're talking pure upside based on what we've seen in the minors, Drew Thorpe from the Yankees organization has to stand out. Had a 34% strikeout rate at A+ level, and then followed up with 40% strikeout rate in just 30 innings at the Double-A level. And also one of the highest, in fact, the highest swinging strike rate in that first stint, and then still just inducing so many whiffs. Got solid velocity, but he's not relying just on his fastball. That's what I like. He's got a good slider and a great changeup. I mean, the Yankees already embraced the youth movement full-fledged on offense. I think it's time to get guys like Severino out of the rotation and give guys like Thorpe a chance. At number 10, let's go with a very similar type of pitcher. That's Christian Mena of the White Sox organization. He posted a 28% strikeout rate at Double-A and also among the leaders in swinging strike rate. Just 20 years old, he was the youngest pitcher to debut at Triple-A this season. Now, the ERA is not pretty, but this is a guy very young with a little more seasoning. We see the upside here. The White Sox clearly in need of some help, so I could definitely see him fitting in along the back end of that rotation pretty shortly. Now at 11, I'm going to go with Robert Gasser for the Milwaukee Brewers. This is a guy who doesn't have elite velocity and maybe won't be among the leaders in strikeouts, but in exchange for that, we get really good command. He's got a 4-pitch mix, a lower arm slot, a lefty that can command the zone, and that's definitely going to work in his favor. He's 24 years old, has a lot more experience than most of these prospects. In fact, he logged 135 innings just at Triple-A last season. You could easily see him being part of this Brewer rotation this coming season. So while the ceiling isn't as high, sometimes there's something to be said for a guy who will just be consistent. I'm thinking George Kirby-esque. Of course, I'm not saying he's that good at commanding the strike zone, but you get the idea. To round out the top 12, this pick might not be as popular as some other prospects you like, but I want to talk about Jack Leiter. Former number 2 overall pick, coming out of Vanderbilt. Obviously a great place to find a good pitcher, but man, so many highlights there, so many amazing performances. Got a lot of hype. Well, so far in the minors, he's just struggled. Back-to-back years at the Double-A level, he's had an ERA over 5 and a walk rate over 13%. There's no denying he has to work on his mechanics a little bit and get more consistent. But the good news is that it's happening. He's been working on his delivery, and the Rangers seem to have liked what they saw. In his last 4 appearances of the season for Frisco, he didn't allow more than 2 runs and didn't walk more than 2 batters in any of them. Granted, they weren't long appearances, but still, it means that we could be on to something. Sometimes those minor league numbers can be deceiving. Sometimes they can scare you, but always bet on talent, because when it clicks, you're going to want in on that player for fantasy. This is a great time to remind you that if you are into fantasy football, you've got to check out our Fantasy Endgame football channel right here. We have everything you need to help win this week and every week.